But yeah, man, if we go back to Rockwall, Texas, in the late 19th and early 20th century, local newspaper reports claim that unusually large human bones were unearthed during digs near the Rockwall site. So a lot of these old newspaper clippings said they were between 7 and 10 feet tall, and I think it's, if you all these old newspaper clippings, by the way, they've all gone. You can't find them.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. Good evening and welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities. I'm Rye the Codega, and your guide on these adventures, these delving into the unknown and looking past the veil. Tonight, I got Brad Lale from that kind of rhymed a little bit. I got Brad from the Awaken podcast coming on very shortly, and I'm not going to do any intro tonight. We're just going to jump straight into it. Before we get there, just a quick reminder, if you guys are enjoying the show, make sure you hit that like, hit that subscribe. Let me know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying as well. Also, if you're tired of the commercials, jump over to my Patreon. For just a coffee a month, you can get yourself ad-free content and skipping all those ads. So, without further ado, let's jump into this interview with Brad. All right, Brad, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities. Glad to have you back. As usual, you're a familiar face, but for those who don't know, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me on once again. I love coming on your show, and one of my favorite shows to listen to, and one of my favorite shows to be on, because every time we talk, man, we get into some deep conversations about everything. You're one of the few people I can talk to who can go tit for tat, and
go the distance.
You can go the distance with some other added information that I possibly didn't know, and that's uncommon for a lot of podcasters. They can't do that. A lot of podcasters are just like, all right, tell me all about this, and then let you go, but you don't do that. So I'm happy to be here, man. Yeah, and for those who are listening, my name is Brad. I'm the host of the Awaken podcast. And to make it very easy for you, you can just find everything about me at theawakenpodcast.com. You can find my links to Spotify and Apple and Instagram and everything else that's out there. So, yeah. And my show is about hidden history and paranormal stuff and metaphysics. And I kind of get into a little bit of everything, because I feel like everything is connected. And everything, all roads lead to spirituality. All roads lead to they're hiding history from us to prevent us from discovering who we are and who we've always been. They don't want us to remember. And right now we're in an awakening where everyone's remembering. Everyone's coming to to that revelation of, oh, we're powerful light beings that can control our own destiny, and we don't need people ruling over us and things like that. So yeah, I talk about a lot of those kinds of things on my show.
That is, yeah. And you're one of my favorite shows to listen to as well. You're I know it's going to come out a little bit later, but the show, one of the episodes I was listening to, is by far one of my favorites. Was that DMT episode, which was really, really interesting. They're taking some DMT and putting a laser on the wall and actually seeing like code in the laser, which kind of leads credence to the world is a, what do you say? We're in the Matrix, more or less. It's a simulation, which, even if it is, it doesn't really change the fact that we still have a creator, that everything else is as real as we see it and touch it, because it's all the senses, whether it's electrical senses, that are being inputted in, and our brain is converting that to what we're seeing. So what's the difference? There really is not. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is a little bit of the 33rd and possibly some giants.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that kind of gets overlooked a lot of times when I talk about the 33rd parallel. People want to know about, like, what happened at Roswell is connected to that. Phoenix Lights is connected to that. But when you start really kind of digging into all of this, you start uncovering places that have like megalithic structures as well. like Rockwall, Texas, and Catalina Islands and things like that. And when you start digging in a little bit deeper and trying to find old newspaper articles and what the mainstream calls fringe researchers and things like that, you're going to start seeing that there is a connection to giants, to biblical giants. Well, that's kind of how I look at it, as biblical giants, and really giants all over the world. It's not just uh,
That's what I was going to say. You know, like just
yeah,
about every ancient culture talks about giants, and we we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit. You know, like oh, I don't want to say it like that, but every culture we take their word for their history and what they did, what they accomplished, and everything like that. But as soon as they talk about giants, we're like, oh, it's just an allegory. It doesn't. It's not really what they meant. They didn't see giants, but yeah, they did.
and yeah, and you can, like I said, you can see it all over the world. I mean, in Mesoamerica, or in North and South America, you find pyramids and all these megalithic structures that don't make any sense. A lot of stories of red haired giants, and um, not just in North and South America, but they also match European giants that have been found over, in France and things like that. Like these old megalithic structures are, or not just old megalithic structures, but like underground cities as well that they're starting to discover. And it's funny, you start to see more and more of that in the news. The Italians are digging or building something, and they discover an ancient Roman road, or there it's I mean, there's catacombs all over the world, and you got to imagine that that's just the remnants of a civilization that was flooded at some point. And that's where it gets into the biblical talk of like Nephilim. And obviously the Nephilim were washed away in the deluge, which somehow it's hard to make that jump from what happened to the giants. They were killed in the flood, and then all of a sudden there were giants again after the flood. And I think it even says in the Bible some remain, right? Because in the Bible you got accounts of David and Goliath, and all the Jebusites and the Hittites and all this stuff. So there's giants all throughout the Bible. So there's no doubt that giants existed all over the world. And again, some of that stuff can be found right here in the United States. I mean, Abraham Lincoln talked about it in his speech about it. The mounds are filled with giants' bones. I don't know the exact phrase, but yeah, again, man, all this stuff is, it's fascinating once you get into the 33rd parallel, because even you can make connections from the city of Phoenix, which is Phoenicia, right, to Tyre, which is on the 33rd parallel in the Middle East. And Tyre, for those who don't know, is a major port city where the king of Tyre, this is a famous passage in Ezekiel 28 in the Bible, where the king of Tyre is also kind of known as Lucifer. A lot of people kind of know the king of Tyre as Lucifer. It says he was a cherub angel that was in the garden, and then he was cast into the abyss. This talks about that in Ezekiel 28. So yeah, those cities connect, and it's weird because the world is almost mirrored. It's almost like as if the world was folded or unfolded at some point. I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, there's some parallels, no pun intended, to, like I said, Phoenix in the Middle East. And then you can kind of see those things all over the world. But a lot of these, I mean, imagine what's in the Pacific, right? In the Pacific, it is complete. I mean, it's like if you turn the globe around, if you believe in the globe, right? If you turn a globe around and you look at the back of it, it's all water, and that's the Pacific Ocean. And you got to imagine there's just so much that's covered up under all that water. And I think Catalina Islands is a big part of that. They've allegedly found giant's bones in Catalina. There was a guy named Ralph Gidden or Glidden, I believe. He was a self-taught archaeologist, and he allegedly discovered skeletons over 7 feet tall, including one that was nine feet tall. And there was also like 64 children surrounding this one giant that was like 7 feet tall, or almost 8 feet tall. And he created a museum on Catalina Island to sort of showcase all of his findings. But of course, as with everything, the Smithsonian shows
I
up.
was going to say, let me guess, Smithsonian
Yeah, the
comes to the
Smithsonian shows
rescue.
up, and they
Yeah.
kind of wipe all this history. And again, man, I think that what they're doing is just trying to hide from us the fact that there were giants. And it's becoming pretty clear to me that, again, the giants were it came from the fallen angels. So they are uh, a negative force on this in this earth. Okay, and when the flood happened, I think their disembodied spirits lingered around, which we know as demons, and then I think that um, somehow some of those giants remained and they continued on. But I think that if you track their blood, and there's people like Gary Wayne and even Laura Sanger who can give you the bloodlines of these things all the way down to like Khazarians, for example. There's a lot of talk about reptilians in the this reptilian bloodline that kind of rules, and that's the the English bloodline, and all of these like I believe King Charles is related to Dracula, for example. So there's all these kind of crazy connections to that bloodline. They're all ruled. All the rulers of European countries are all from the same bloodline, is what I'm trying to say. And a lot of that traces back to to the Nephilim. And so I think that what these leaders, these rulers, these monarchs in the world are continuously trying to hide the fact that they are part of the evil culture that used to exist, and they're trying to keep that away from us in some way, so we don't all rise up and fight these things again, if that makes any sense. So they get Smithsonian involved since the 1840s to go out, and I've been to tons of sites along the 33rd parallel, including lots of sites in Georgia and Alabama, and every single site, every single time, there's a little placard that says the Smithsonian came through in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and found these things and that thing, but we don't get to see them. They exist somewhere, but we don't get to see those things. So
Wow, I didn't know that they had these placards saying like the Smithsonian had
yeah.
come in and robbed the graves. That's that's interesting. You got to take a picture of one of those signs there and put that up next time you go. That's wow. Okay. And I knew about the what do I say? I knew about the bloodlines, that there was a lot of, they want to keep those bloodlines secure. I knew there was a lot of crazy connections as well. And if you go into, we're talking about just not just kings, but if you go into like the presidents as well, like a lot of them are all connected as well. So that's reminiscent of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, man. And a lot of these locations, like I said, once they come in, see, in the United States at least, I don't know how it works. I'm sure it's similar because I've been to Egypt before, and I believe the University of Egypt or whatever it is in charge of like all things related to the pyramids. There's also like some czar that's over everything, kind of like a prime minister type. But in the United States, what they do is they kind of put schools or universities in charge, and they give these universities government grants, and basically that's their way of keeping them in check. Well, we're going to take away those government grants from you if you don't continue this narrative or what have you. And so like every location, like I said, with the Catalina Islands, that was one of them. I believe UCLA is in charge of all these what they said that the bones were from Catalina Islands were Native Americans. Like some of the remains were Native Americans. Some of the stuff they're still finding, they're saying is, oh, it's Native Americans. And so they swiftly come in there, and they say that there's a repatriation effort to make sure that these bones go to their families and things like that. So what happens from there? Nobody knows. These bones just disperse into the ocean. Who knows what happens? But I mean,
Just lost.
yeah, dude, and not far from Catalina Islands, which again is right off the coast of uh, California, right off San Diego, which is where the USS Nimitz event happened. And then if you go down the coast and out into closer to South America, that's where Easter Islands are, and there's a lot of obviously these giant sculptures. None of this stuff makes sense, obviously, to people who listen to this show and to people who listen to my show. None of these things make sense. They didn't have the kind of they had teeth and stuff like that, and they, to carve these structures with, and somehow smooth them out and all this stuff. And we're saying that they were ancient peoples and they were cavemen and
Yeah,
all
just
this other
learning
stuff.
how to harvest food and
Yeah,
at best have copper tools.
yeah, but I mean, there again, and what happened with the statues at Easter Island? They were buried, 100 feet deep, and
Yeah.
they had to excavate a lot of these, and a lot of them still aren't even excavated. And
Yeah,
so it just
which leads us to, you know, that could lead us to two different tracks. It could be a cataclysmic event, mud flood kind of sort of
right.
thing, or buried on purpose to, to cover up something.
Yeah, but I mean, like I that the flood, how the only thing that I would say yes to on that is like Göbekli Tepe, right? It was like intentionally buried, and it's like because there was different dirts brought in from different locations and different sands and stuff to purposely cover that up. But when would they have done that? That's the thing. I mean, allegedly we didn't have tractors and all this other stuff back then, right?
I I heard a theory about Göbekli Tepe, but that it was because it's in Turkey, right? When Noah landed the ark, he sacrificed a certain amount of animals to God, and they at this site they have those pillars. They have like the vulture pillar. They have all these pillars based on animals, and some people are wondering if this was the altar that Noah created and sacrificed his animals to. Just something I just heard actually today, but eh, who knows? But that being said, like you said, it was still covered up for some reason.
Yeah, well, that one is, allegedly there's evidence that that happened, but that's a massive effort to bury a lot of these things. And that's why I think what happens a lot of times is wars are created to go in and destroy these places rather than having to cover them up with sand and dirt and all this other stuff. So I think that there is an intentional effort nowadays to erase history, not just Christian history, but all history, and keep us from knowing all the secrets of the past for sure. And if you look, every war in the last 40 years has been on the 33rd parallel in the Middle East. And every time you see it, I don't know if you remember the ISIS uh, people going into and just destroying these museums and all this stuff. There was
Yes,
okay, so
correct.
that right, that is what I'm talking about. I think that they were just paid to do that. Like I think that somebody probably paid them and said, "Go destroy them," because I mean, if you look at Dresden and all these other wars over the last 150 years, every one of them have destroyed cities and museums. And you think about the Library of Alexandria, for example. There's always a destroying something that happens that destroys. Even the Civil War in the South, they destroyed a lot of the South, right, with fire and all this stuff. The White House was destroyed with a fire. There's always this like
You know who
something.
burnt down the White House, right?
Who?
The Canadians.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
Eight,
allegedly, right? That's what they
allegedly
tell
in
us, right?
1812.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, we weren't really even Canada at that time, but yeah, that's our only claim to fame is that we burnt
It,
down the White House allegedly.
but the truth is, we don't know, right? I
No,
mean, they could tell us anything, and we just go, "Yep, that was," and then they
you're
pound it
you're
in our
right. You
head,
know that
you know.
that's like me. I haven't questioned it until you just kind of said, "Well, allegedly." I'm like, "Oh, yep, yeah, right."
I'm not
Who
saying you're
actually did
wrong
it?
or right or whatever, but I'm saying like they could literally do that, in they did it in real time in 2020, and they tried to gaslight us all into believing their narratives. And I think that's what woke a lot of people up was whenever they started seeing, we all started seeing like, oh, they do this on a regular. So now it takes everything that I've ever been taught my entire life, even George Washington, even Abraham Lincoln, all these people. I question everything now. Did George Washington, was he really the first president and that kind of stuff? And it really gets to a lot of like these deep questions about like our history. Because even if you look at George Washington in as depicted in DC, you'll see George Washington in like these Caesar, what is it called? Those togas. You'll see him
Oh,
in
yeah, yeah,
togas.
yeah. Yes, yeah. They're
Yeah, so
togas
he
kind
looks
of
like
thing.
a ancient Greek person. He's in a toga and he's in flip flops, and then there's all these statues all over that are ISIS statues and all these Middle Eastern and Greek, all over the DC and all over these Capitol buildings all over the United States, many of which are on ley lines, which is like an ancient grid that covers the earth. So um, yeah, I think that there's just this mass effort to delete our history. I mean, these old buildings, for example, like what was the subway called in Grand Central Station in New York? Big, beautiful architectural building that was beautiful, and then they replaced it with this like metal, you know, uh, uninspiring, ugly. I don't know how to describe it. This new structure, and it's like bums everywhere. And then there's bums before, but it's like
Mhm.
disgusting now.
But it really loses its majesticness and its
Yeah,
power, almost in a way. Because I feel that these were somewhere they harness the energy, possibly like you said, like on ley lines and whatnot, that they were able to convert that, and they built these other, I don't know, dreary, drab structures. They just kind of like throw the energy away almost. It causes more of a negative sink almost. They ruin that point.
yeah, man. But taking it back to the giant stuff, dude, and since we're talking about Greek, I mean, it's pretty evident that ancient Greece had this. They might have been the Atlantean culture. I don't know. I mean, or maybe if maybe they weren't Atlantean culture. They have the pantheon, which some say it's like the divine council that from Psalm 82 in the Bible. But even then, they were battling. The Olympians were battling these giants. I mean, there was a famous battle called the. I can never say the word gigantomy. I can't ever. I don't know.
Okay,
But it's a
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, this is pretty much where it's just another confirmation of giants. I mean, everywhere you look, there's always this theme of giants. And they were like basically these monstrous beings. They were often depicted as these huge, powerful warriors with serpent-like legs. And so, anyways, they had this big fallout. So it was the battle of gods versus giants, and that's then you got in the Middle East the story of the jinn. That's where you get the story of genie in a bottle, right? Because the jinn would trap the souls of the disembodied entities of the Nephilim. They would trap them in bottles. And so that's why people today who still do ghost hunting, they go and they use like these plastic bottles. They'll open plastic bottles. And when they do like trying to clear a house, that's what they'll do is try to, and even my mom, she has this wine bottle rack that's in her front yard as like a display. Well, that has ancient roots to it as well. And again, that goes back to trapping the evil spirits in these bottles. And that's where where you get the term genie in a bottle from is the gin in a bottle. So it's pretty, again, all this stuff goes deep, man. I mean, all throughout history, it's pretty evident that there's nonstop talk about giants. But if you mention it, modern mainstream archaeologists will say, "Oh, that's nonsense. That didn't exist." It's like it's pretty clear, but nobody ever taught. There's every civilization around the world has stories of giants, and
Yeah,
has
you were
found bones of
100%
giants.
correct. And like with those bottles, I want to go more into the gin one of these days. I need to get someone on who can go deep into the gin because that's really interesting. I know we did that live once and we had that gentleman come on talk about the gin, but I definitely would like to talk about that more. But yeah, let's continue with the giants, please.
Well, if you go to like if you go on the 33rd parallel, you go to Rockwall, Texas, which happens to be the home of Alex Jones, right? And if you believe that, that's where he came from. Because a lot of people think he's the old former comic Bill Hicks. He's just been recreated and reinvented to be this new character that comes in and plays a role in our reality. You mentioned the reality bending stuff earlier with the DMT Discovery episode I did, which basically Danny Goller just kind of confirmed, yeah, we are living in a matrix or a simulation, but what he said is like there's a computational layer. It's the same thing as physics, but it's just that physics there's just another computational layer before physics, and so it's pretty much the same thing. There's still a creator, there's still all this other stuff, and so people can feel safe in knowing that even if this is a simulation, there's still a creator, there's still a God, there's still a supreme being, I guess you could say. So, but yeah, man, if we go back to Rockwall, Texas, in the late 19th and early 20th century, local newspaper reports claim that unusually large human bones were unearthed during digs near the Rockwall site. So a lot of these old newspaper clippings said they were between 7 and 10 feet tall, and I think it's if you all these old newspaper clippings by the way, they've all gone. You can't find them. Like I went to a local library here, which is a huge library, and I wanted to find these old newspaper clippings. And I was like, because there was an event that happened here in this town where a nuclear bomb dropped on the town, and I wanted to find all these. I figured they had tons of them everywhere, and they didn't. I just assumed there was like this whole repository of old newspaper articles or whatever that they could just walk into and grab this stuff, but there's not. So they were lucky to find that someone had did a scan of one of the newspapers, and I was able to take pictures of that. But if you go back any further than that, you're not going to find anything from early 1900s or 1850s or anything like that. So um,
Things are just wiped out, right? It's kind of like they have like this like Men in Black coming through and just kind of deleting the history.
yeah, it's like a shelf life almost, right? It's like a new administration comes in and they probably go, all right, get rid of all these things, and then next thing you know, man, we're 100 years later trying to figure out all of our history because we just don't have any evidence of it.
This is so reminiscent of like the ancient Egyptians and any other cultures. Like whenever there was a passing of a king and you bring in the new king, they would like erase everything and like he would put his name on everything and kind of like throw out stuff, and then it's still happening. It's kind of funny that you're saying that, because it's kind of like this realization that this stuff is still happening, and it's the same thing of like when people look back and it's like, oh, the government 100 years ago or 50 years ago was horrible, they did this to these people, the Tuskegee experiment, they did this, but now they're great, they don't do any of that. And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
this it's still happening. What do you think is changing? So it's the same thing from these Egyptian dynasties and all these other dynasties, that they're removing everything else that just doesn't serve their past or their agenda. So sorry to interrupt, keep going.
No, man. Yeah. I mean, Caesar mentioned that on my show on Obvious Obelisks, where we were talking about, he said that a lot of obelisks were moved from Egypt and they've been dispersed all over the world. So even that, let's imagine they're 1,000 years from now, a flood comes, and 1,000 years from now, people are unearthing everything. Well, they're going to find all
Yeah.
these obelisks all over the world, and they're going to be like, well, this was, so who knows, man? Who knows how many times we've been reset? Who knows how many times there's been flooded or all
It's
whatever.
so true. Like Cleopatra's Needle is in New York. If you line
Right.
up the three in New York, it's in the same orientation as Orion's Belt as well. And they're going to be. There's more to it than we really know. But I agree. It's like, why are these ancient Egyptian artifacts kind of moved all around? And
Yep.
then that being said, why are they finding ancient Egyptian artifacts in areas like in the Grand Canyon as well? So I don't know. It could be there. I don't know what's going on.
Well, dude, I mean, I mentioned it on your show before. Like, I've been to Egypt, I've been to the pyramids. There's no way that those same people are the same people who built the pyramids. So I don't even want to call them ancient Egyptians. They're just There was a civilization that existed all over the world that built pyramids and all these structures that again are aligned with Orion's belt. I mean, you see that in Mesoamerica, obviously a lot, right? It's like everywhere they're always lined up, even with the Phoenix lights that happen in Phoenix. The Orion's belt was right above Phoenix, Arizona when that happened. And so like, yeah. So, and once that faded, once it, I guess, went to its next location, then the all those lights and orbs and stuff, people didn't see them for many years later until Orion's belt came back around. Then they started seeing them again. So there's always there's always an Orion's belt connection to all this stuff. And again, Phoenix, Arizona is on the 33rd parallel, like I said before. But and there's a place called Casa Grande in Phoenix that a lot of people don't even know about. It's like older than Stonehenge, but but nobody knows about this. And when you mention it to people, some people might say, "Well, I was taught about that in school," and I'm like, "When? When? I wasn't taught about any pyramids or any, standing stones or megaliths, but they're everywhere, dude, everywhere, and people are just starting to see this." And whenever I had what's her name, Michelle Gibson on my show, she said that everywhere she goes now, she can easily see standing stones and all these ancient stone structures and megaliths that are everywhere. Like she just happens to, it's like any city you go to, you see them, and it's like we've built our cities all around these things. We've built. There's a town in Mississippi. I just saw a guy on Instagram post about that was basically built on top of one of those mounds or pyramids or whatever you want to call them. I call them pyramids, and Yeah, and most of the golf courses in the United States were built on top of mounds, and that there's tons of evidence of that. And so again, what they've done is they've roped these areas off and made them exclusive to people who have a lot of money, like people who own all these golf courses and stuff like that, and nobody will ever be able to come in and excavate or do any kind of, because they just think it's a golf course now. They don't have any clue about what's going on, what's hidden beneath them. But
Yeah,
yeah,
throw a
man.
golf course on and bulldoze everything out and make it disappear. And so that there's no more, like you said, no more excavation and whatnot. It's no more building homes or something like that where they're digging foundations or putting in the basements and then they discover something. If they can just put a plot of land that'll just be left kind of as is, and no one can question it, no one can go on, because like you said, it's for rich people only.
Yeah, dude, and what they'll do is like, and it feels like the newspapers or the mainstream media, they always have the backs of these people. Obviously, they cover it up, and then they'll immediately discredit. They'll put some kind of negative name with this, or white supremacist or whatever, to make it sound, or a crazy person did this or whatever, to make it sound like anything. So if I went out there right now and discovered something, what they would immediately do is go, crazy conspiracy theorist Brad Lale, who has a famous podcast about conspiracy, they would immediately start like just saying all this stuff that's not true. And meanwhile, just like with Rockwall, Texas, all these workers found these, there's stories of these workers in the late 1800s, early 1900s, finding all these giants bones while they were digging, while they were, basically making wells and quarrying the area and stuff like that. And if you look at these places, it's pretty clear it's a wall. But mainstream will tell you it's like natural sandstone dikes and all these other different things. And it's like, how can you look at that and say that's anything other than some kind of a wall that was built clearly a long time ago? But they don't want to tell you that. They don't want to go against the mainstream narrative that Native Americans were here. We came in and stole the land from Native Americans and all this stuff. And it's like, no, I think that there was a civilization way before Native Americans. That we just kind of started over. Civilization started over, and these, Peru and all these places, the base layer of all these Peruvian or these Paracan um, megalithic sites are all these, you know, molded together boulders, and then on top of it you got all these like rocks that are kind of fun. It looks like Native Americans try to stack rocks on top of these things to try to,
To extend
reuse
them and
them.
build them higher, or
Yeah.
to reuse it. Yeah, yeah, like these molded, I agree with you. They look like they came out of molds, like clay or Play-Doh almost in a way, and they're just set so perfectly. And then we're set up to this next stage where it's supposed to be evolution, or this, we're supposed to increase in our abilities, but in fact it's a negative. We're decreasing.
Yeah, we're definitely going backwards, man. But those guys that found those bones, they claim that they were these giant skulls that they found, and they had like double rows of teeth. And this was at Rockwall, and of course, once again, the Smithsonian comes in and
Saves the
deliberately
day.
destroys. Yeah, and so you can't go and excavate some of these places, because what happens is they become, they're given over to universities, and they're considered part of like state, like, so it's not just federal stuff, it's local stuff. It's just like state parks and things like that too, that they're protected areas that you can't just go in and excavate yourself. Like you and I, if we really wanted to, we could pool resources and go make that happen, right? But they won't let us. They have all these governing
Hoops
bodies,
to
and
jump through and
yeah, you
whatnot.
would never be able to
Yeah.
do that. You would never be able to just go dig and show so you kind of have to hope that there's somebody that lives there that just decides to take a shovel one day and start digging underneath their house to maybe find something. But yeah, man, Rockwall, Texas is, again, on the 33rd parallel. And by the way, Rockwall, Texas is where 3 of the 5 red heifers came from for the red heifer ritual in Israel. Yeah.
That's. I need
So,
to know more about this red heifer ritual. I think we should go into that another time. But I I, I know a little bit, but I would definitely like to know more about this red heifer ritual.
well, basically they're trying to bring back from what I gather is that they're trying to bring back the Messiah, but the Messiah already came. It's Jesus Christ. He's the Messiah. So who are they trying to bring back? That's the question to me. But yeah, but there's a great guy to talk to. He was on my show. God, I can't remember his name now, but I'll give you his name. He's awesome. He wrote a book about it, but he looks at things through our lens as well. But he also has a degree in Jewish studies, so it's like he's kind of like, a little bit protective as well. He won't go full, you know, they're the Zionists that are doing this or anything like that. He takes it from an archaeological perspective because he is an archaeologist as well. So I forgot his name. God, I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry. Mondo Gonzalez. Mondo Gonzalez is his name.
There we
Yeah.
go. There we go.
So, but yeah, man, it's always again the Smithsonian coming in and covering up this stuff, and you know, who knows, man. I mean, if me and my brother last summer just got out on the road and we just drove, and we didn't even do anything in South Carolina. We just stopped in Georgia, and in the first day in Georgia, it was like we went to a barbecue joint and in the middle of nowhere, and I saw this old boy hunting gear and stuff, and I said, "Hey, man, you know about any old pyramids or rock structures or anything in the woods?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, Bo, let me tell you this." And he pulls out his GIS map on his phone. He's like, "Bo, you go here and find this, and you can go under when the water gets low, you can see pyramids and stuff pointing up at the top underneath the lake." And yeah, and he said, "What?" He said, "Go down the road about 50 miles, and there's a little town. They got some cool stuff in there." And we hit that town up, and there was always some local boy hunter that, yeah, man, follow me here. I'm gonna take you to this place in the middle of the woods, and dude, we could have spent probably a whole month in Georgia just like going from site to site to site to site. There's all kind of different pyramids and rock structures and effigies and megalithic places. We stumbled upon a place called Shaking Rock in the middle of nowhere, which I believe I mentioned on your show before.
Yes, yes, I do recall that.
It's just a rock structure that goes to a point in the middle of like this flat land. And we just went there, me and my little brother, and was just walking around, and completely like there's nobody guarding it, anything. You could probably, I mean, sneakily go in there and kind of look around, I guess, if you wanted to, but I'm sure they have it protected by some kind of state, whatever state park laws or whatever the case is. But yeah, it does seem like the states have somebody that runs the state governments as well is kind of colluding with the federal government to keep all this information from us. And the only thing I can think of is that it's bad. Maybe they don't want us to know that cataclysms happen. Maybe they just don't want us to know our true history. And I think it's the latter.
I think it's the latter as well. I think they're hiding it, for so many reasons, because then it proves, it gives more credence to the Bible. It gives more credence to, everything, and they lose their ability to control us.
Yeah, they talk a lot about, by the way, the giants and stuff on Uncharted X, a guy named Brian Forrester. And there's been interviews on Coast to Coast FM about the Rockwall Giants. So there's some books written about like Giants on Record, I believe, Jim Varia or something like that. And then there's another guy named Richard something who wrote a book about giants who ruled America. So there's a lot of literature on all of this stuff that people can look into if they want to kind of dig a little bit deeper. I know I'm kind of skimming the surface here on some of this stuff, but yeah, man, I mean, just in the United States alone, imagine what we could find if we just went into the woods and looked for ourselves. That was what the Appalachian intelligence guys did when they found all those geoglyphs, right? Like, or is it, yeah, geoglyphs, I believe. Just megalithic structures with like what they think is a pyramid as well that has all these ancient hieroglyphic looking markings all over them and all this other stuff. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's there to be found if you know where to look and if you talk to the locals. But it's all trying to be hidden, taken away from us.
yeah, we got to and also you just kind of have to know where you're looking as well, like what you're looking at. We got to Alabama, and right beside a Buc-ee's. I don't know if you know what Buc-ee's is or not, but
I
Buc-ee's is
don't.
like huge gas stations, like 150 gas pumps and all this stuff. And a lot of people go there. Believe me, there's thousands who go there a day. And it was right beside a Buc-ee's. And as we were turning into the Buc-ee's to get some gas and some food and stuff, my brother was like, "Look at that, man!" And it was like this, what looked like a pyramid, just sitting right beside the Buc-ee's. And it was like it was underneath the ground. It was like covered it, but it came to a point like it was. It wouldn't have been a mountain. It's just a weird mountain to be in the middle of nowhere. But it looks like they built the road around this thing, and then they built the Buc-ee's right beside it. They didn't mess with this place, and it's funny that he noticed it, and I wouldn't even. And I was like, yeah, and I stopped, and I ended up taking a picture of it as well, which I'll share with you guys at some point if you want, or you
Yeah,
can put it in the show notes. Yeah.
let's put that picture on now so everybody can see. Yes.
Oh, I'll try to find it for you. But man, I got kids, so I got thousands and thousands of photos. You know what I mean?
I totally understand. I totally understand.
And plus, I sell baseball cards on the side, so I got a lot of baseball cards in here as well. But I will find it and I will send it to you to share for sure.
I'm going to hold you to that.
But yeah, man, this all again, these giants all around the world, dude. I mean, it's hard to ignore it, and the fact that universities and mainstream archaeology and all that continuously ignores biblical giants. I mean, they have, Jack and the Beanstalk, right? I mean, the story of these giants, right? The fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, right? This giant that lives above the clouds that comes down and eats humans. I mean, this is what the story of the Nephilim was. This is why God flooded the earth, was because these things were just devouring humans. That's why they were always depicted like what's his name, Nephilim look like clowns. Paul Stobbs talks about like they have red lips, and some people think that it was because they ate humans and they always had blood all over their face and things like that. So they were just eating humans and creating these weird hybrid animals and all this stuff, which goes to all these stories, these ancient stories of mermaids and all these other things, because they were not just mating with human women, they were mating with everything. And some think that pigs are related to humans, and this is why a lot of people in the Middle East don't eat pigs, is because they know that they used to be humans.
Yeah, and that would make sense as to why we use like pig parts as like replacement parts for us. Like when they do some open heart surgery, maybe like valves, they use pig valves and stuff like that. Okay, I've never really heard that theory, but okay.
Well, if you look at like Europe, again, there's a book by Roald Dahl called Big Friendly Giant, right? And think about that story. It's giants who come from a faraway land, possibly beyond the ice wall for people who are flat earthers. They come from faraway lands at night to eat humans, except for this big friendly giant, right? That makes friends with this little girl or whatever it is. But mostly there's always these stories of these giants eating people, eating humans. And you have to look at things like Jack and the Beanstalk, like I said. I mean, it's pretty evident. If people are singing about these things and writing nursery rhymes about them, then there's probably something to it,
I agree. Now, why do you think I'm going to circle back to Catalina Islands? I was kind of thinking this, like, why is there so many giants on Catalina Island? Was it? I don't know. Well, I'm assuming before the big floods and whatnot that they're able to get in and out there. But why was that like this focal point as well?
I don't know. It's called the Channel Islands, right? I just think that I think again the flood happened and then it killed a lot of the giants, obviously, and that's why their bones remain in these places. And when you see like, how they say like Hawaii is an extinct volcano that kind of rose up. I think what's happening is these are just places that were always there. The water levels just kind of lowering back down to where we can see some of these areas again. And we're going to start discovering. I think that's what happened with Catalina Islands. I think that's what happened with Easter Island. It's like some of these places are starting to kind of rise again from the depths of the sea, and we're just kind of rediscovering these places now. And dude, I don't think that the flood happened 2,500 years ago only. I think that something happened like 150 years ago, like something else. like some other major event. Again, if it's the mud flood, the reason I say that is if you look at what happened in Asheville, that crazy flood that happened with the hurricane, right after the hurricane, which buried the towns around it and everything. If you look at pictures of those towns, they're all like there's mud that goes up to the tops of roofs of these houses and different stuff like that. I think that's what happened not too long ago as well. And that, so I don't think there was a mud flood. I think there was a flood, and it just buried. The water
Everything's in
receded,
mud.
and
The flood
everything's in
flood
mud.
buried things in mud.
Yeah, everything's in mud now because of that. And so, yeah, but I know it's hard to prove that kind of stuff. But my gut feeling tells me that these things happen regularly, and some cataclysms or something happens regularly. Maybe it's pole reversals or whatever the case is, but something happens regularly where civilization is reset. Now, if is that people running the reset? I mean, they talk about it openly now, you know, or truthfully, to be honest with you, though, I think that they can drive us in a way because these things, these creatures, these disembodied entities, excuse me, that run the world, they have no ability to create. And so we're God, we're made in God's image. We're light beings that are made in his image. And we do have that ability to create. So I think that they do this thing where they have to try to get us to manifest their reality. And so that's why I think you've been seeing a lot of movies and all this other stuff about floods, and think about like 2012 and like Y2K and all these things. I think they're continuously trying to get us to reset the population of Earth again, because we are God's people, and that's their job is to destroy the population of Earth. So I think they continue to put movies in front of us that
Or
get
in
us to
scenarios. Yes.
to get us to think that this end of the world is happening, so we can actually bring it into our reality. But I think that our consciousness, our collective consciousness, which is the Schumann resonance, basically, right? I think that is what creates the reality. If we are in a simulation like we talked about earlier, I think that we are the cartographers of our reality. So we create the world as we go through it. We manifest things from whatever we can think of in our brains. We're like little projectors, and we project it out into it. Because, dude, I even with some of the success of this show, and I'm sure you feel it too, the success never makes any sense to me. I'm like, where does this, like, I don't understand how this happens. I don't, but what I do know is that I want it to happen in my head. And so everything that I've ever wanted badly, I've gotten. And not necessarily through hard work all the time, but there's an effort that goes into whenever I want something, I see it in my mind. And if you see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand, is like the famous, the secret book, right? The book, the secret, this manifestation thing. But I do believe that if you see something in your mind, you can achieve it, but you kind of put that target in there and you kind of move towards it. And as you physically move towards it, you create this magnetic wake around you, and things just start flowing to you magnetically. Like attracts like, these positive things flow to you. And next thing you know, you're in a grocery store, and you're talking to a guy, and he's like, oh yeah, I got a podcast too. It's a really famous podcast. Why don't you come on it? You know what I mean? And next thing you know, you're doing something that you manifested into, and it doesn't even make any sense, man. And my life makes no sense. The things I've done in my life, the places I've been, makes zero sense. The only thing I could think of is that I've willed all this stuff into existence. And I think that our free will is what creates the future. It's what creates the next thing and the next event and the next event. So
I think that's interesting. I like that. I like that we are the creators of our reality, right?
yeah.
And the double. I talked about this recently about the double slit experiment. That is proof that we create reality. It's undeniable proof. So if there's no observer, then things happen that we can't control per se. That things are happening that shouldn't happen. Things are happening where things are existing where they shouldn't exist. But as soon as we observe it, we bring it into this reality. So that it's so powerful, so powerful.
Yeah, it's very easy to trick our minds into something. I mean, you can look at those famous art paintings where you stare at something long enough, you see an image, or any of these things can trick our minds. We can sit here and look at our screen and watch one of those hypnotic wheels spinning around, and then look at a picture on the wall and you can see the picture swirling. I mean, just that easy. That's how our minds can be tricked into something. But you have to know, you have to trust your instincts and trust yourself enough to don't let anybody else drive you. If you turn on the news, if you turn on the radio, if you turn on YouTube or whatever, and whatever is playing is affecting you in some way, then you are a slave. That's all it is. You're a slave to that person who's doing that. If you let it affect your energy, because our energy is our only real currency in this world, if you let it affect your energy, then you are their slave. So you're a slave to Fox News, you're a slave to CNN, you're a slave to President whoever or whatever, slave to Elon Musk. Or if you let any of these people control you in any way, then you're their slave. And so we have to learn to keep our little balls of energy to ourselves and put that power towards something that matters in our direct lives. And then we talked about this last time, right, on your show, the same thing. And a lot of people in the comments were like, what about other people? And it's like, yeah, you can still care and love other people, but like put your energy towards something that matters is what I'm saying. Like, forget everybody else, focus on your family first, let that love emanate through you, and then it emanates through your family, and then light the paths of others, right? When you see someone at the store, say nice things to them, help them out, whatever the case is, help them fix their tire, whatever the case is. But yeah, that's how we do it. That's how we fight. So we can talk about who runs the world and what they're covering up all we want till we're blue in the face. But what really matters is how we live our day to day, and how we put our energy into this world. And if someone has us frazzled all the time, then we are never going to be able to use our full potential and build pyramids again and build all these megalithic structures again. We'll never be able to use our full potential if our energy is occupied somewhere else.
Now, do you believe possibly that the giants were involved in building these megalithic structures? They're found all near them. Were they the architects of it?
Maybe. I mean, if they were, built, if they were fallen angel, you know, offspring, they had a lot of power. They knew how to use energies, and they knew how to telepathically. Dude, I just had my cousin on my show, and I'm gonna release this episode soon. And she was talking about a possible abduction. Right? She stopped to look at this UFO. Next thing you know, she had missing time. And I asked her why she did that. Why'd you get out of the car? Or she actually mentioned it first. And she said, well, I didn't think nothing of it at first, but now I know that they were controlling my mind. I said, well, how do you know that? She said, well, in my house, I went to go to the bathroom or something. I don't remember what the story was, but she was walking down the hall and she saw this giant blue orb flying down the hall. And once she noticed the orb noticed her. Like, oh, she's looking at me. So it stopped and it like turned around and it said, go back to sleep, telepathically. And so she said no. She kind of was fighting against this thing, like, no, I'm not going back to sleep. And it was like she said she felt her eyes drooping, and she was really trying to fight against this thing, but it kept telling her to go back to sleep, ignore everything you've seen here, and blah blah blah. So the next thing you know, she was asleep. She woke up and she had to write all this down. She drew a picture of it and all this stuff. So the point is that they have this ability to tap into a layer of consciousness and energy that we don't. They can affect our memory. They can put us to sleep. They can control our minds. So they know something that we don't know, that we don't remember. And once we remember that we can do this, once we remember that we are also can telepathically communicate with each other, right? Because if they're fallen angels and we're created in God's image, that means that we're more powerful than them, right? And so we can easily fight back with this stuff. When
I, I really agree with that. Like I've constantly said that I believe that we have like governors on us. There's
yes.
some place that we're being restricted, almost handcuffed, that we don't know the full potential. Now, was it the creator that did this so that we, maybe couldn't become so destructive? Because humanity has a way of being destructive, or is it also maybe this ruling class, this elite bloodline that is doing this to us. They have a way to do this just to limit us so that we don't know how truly powerful we really are.
Well, I believe what is the angels called that were serpent angels? Were they the Rephaim? No, they weren't the Rephaim. I have
No,
to.
the Rephaim are technically the Nephilim after the flood, I believe.
Yes, they were. But I'm trying to. There was a serpent angel, seraphim. That's what it is. I'm sorry, I didn't
Ah,
know the name.
Seraphim. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so I think that the seraphim angels were the fallen angels, and their bloodline now is those reptilians, which is why you see snakes and lizards all throughout the Bible, all throughout all these historical sites like Göbekli Tepe. Everywhere you go, there's a story of a dragon or some sort of a lizard thing. I believe like a lot in Mexico, right? Isn't there a lot of places like
Yep,
in that?
the feathered serpent as well.
Right.
It's Quetzalcoatl is one of those as well.
Yeah, and they say that these things were the things that came and taught them how to uh, civilize the world again, right? To build civilizations again,
Hmm.
right?
Kind of like
That's the
Prometheus
story.
bringing the fire. Yeah, bringing the fire to the people. Yes.
So it would make sense if some of these things survived and then they went all around the world and said, okay, rebuild these populations, or here's how you do it again. Because that's what, again, according to the book of Enoch, these things were these fallen angels, and then the Nephilim were teaching human women all about makeup and jewelry and all this other stuff. So they tried to go back out into the world, and basically they recreated the world in whatever way they wanted to recreate, right? And so this is where you go, imagine like some of these things survive and then they go and they find these cultures, and these cultures think that they're gods now. They land in Mexico or wherever and they're like, oh, these are gods. They look different than us, they're serpent like or whatever the case is. And then so you get people all throughout history thinking that these serpent type things are gods. And again, the Anunnaki and all, I don't know all the history of all that stuff, but there's a lot of civilizations that talk about some serpent like people who are like rulers. And I think that those things still rule today. The devil rules this earth. That's what it says in the Bible. So I think that those things still control the world. But there are God's people that are waking up to all this. There's a revelation. That's what an awakening is. It's a revelation of our true selves. You know, I'm talking a lot. You can stop me anytime you
No,
want, dude.
that's okay. That's okay. I'm just like, yeah, a revelation of our true selves and the awakening, which is the name of your podcast, the Awaken Podcast. It's about this awakening, and and I actually believe that there's waves of these awakenings. Like, when we talk in the '60s, free love and the hippie. I feel that the hippie movement was slightly an awakening until it was commandeered, and there's a lot of those. But I think we have to be very aware that in these movements or these moments, these awakenings, that they aren't being perverted by um, the others.
Yeah, and you can see a little bit of that all of a sudden. And Julia mentioned this on my show, the Cosmic Peach, from the Cosmic Peach podcast. She mentioned that all of a sudden everybody's becoming Christian. Like Russell Brand and all these people. It's like, once we start waking up to all this stuff, then all of a sudden, Mark Zuckerberg's our friend, and he's the friendly UFC guy who dresses like you and wears a chain and all this stuff, right? And it's like, they continue to just whatever the pendulum swings, that's what they'll jump on. They'll corrupt that, and they'll swing back. They'll corrupt that. That's why they corrupted the Republican Party, then they corrupted the Democrat Party, then they're going to corrupt the Republican Party again, and you're starting to see it right unfold in front of your eyes again with at least here in the United States. But they are a they're not even a predator class. They're more like a leech class. They leech their energies on to whoever can help them manifest whatever they want into this reality, man. But again, once people start waking up, like you're right, there was an enlightenment in the late 1800s, right? Uh, that what happened to it? It was like it basically quelled again. And every so often we start to wake up, and then they kind of like, oh yeah, we're on your side, and then they control the narrative again, and make us all feel like, we're winning, but we're not. They just keep corrupting whoever, and it seems like it's going to be an endless cycle, and that's why we kind of have to blast through that right now. It
We
seems like a
do,
good.
and we need to all be aware that what happens is like these awakenings, these movements, everything all start with good intentions, but they all become perverted and taken over. And you have to be aware when that point happens and walk away from it. I think that's the most important thing, because there's people who hang on for dear life, like diehard Republicans or diehard Democrats, and even if their party is doing stuff that they, in reality should never agree with, they're just blindly following, and it's, I'm not talking just political. It is so many other movements out there, and I don't want to get into that, but just take a step back and look at any type of freedom or like benefit to help people. They're always It always starts out with good intentions. The road is paved, with good intentions, and then it is just completely sidetracked, taken over, and gone into a perversion of sorts, and it loses all of its credibility.
Well, that's what happened with. If you look at what happened to Trump over the last 8 years, for example, they tried to impeach him. They've tried to put him in jail. They've tried to literally kill him. Right? They've stolen elections from him, and now he's back in office, and we're supposed to believe that those same people are all working together to move America forward in some way. I mean, those people still exist. They still exist in these offices. They're not going anywhere. They're embedded. These serpents, these people who worship serpents are in these political positions. They're in these executive branches and all the stuff of our government, and they're not going anywhere. They're deep rooted, man. And as a matter of fact, they have a whole shadow government that they run everything, and they have black ops, and black budgets and all this other stuff. They have unlimited funding to keep all this from us, and that they will continue to keep it. That's why you got Roswell, and that's why you got all these other, you know, making us, gaslighting us and making us think that these UFOs aren't real. Well, they are. They're just demons. They're demons that are putting on a shell to prevent themselves from God's light dispersing them back into the ether where they are, where they're from. So
Interesting.
yeah.
I like it, man. I like it. But I think we should bring this in for a landing here and start to wrap it up. Is there anything you want to cover before we head out?
No, man, I talk a lot. So if I start
No,
talking again,
no,
I'll probably go for another
no.
30 minutes.
That
So
that is fine. That is fine. That's what you're here for, man. You're here to talk. So
yeah.
one last time, why don't you give a shout out to your show and where everybody can find you?
Yeah, again, first of all, thank you again for having me, Rye. I appreciate it, man. I love your show. I love everything you're doing. The quality of your show is amazing. And people are going to start coming on more and more as they see how much work you're putting into it. A lot of people don't know this, but Ryan, our friends from and behind the scenes, we're always sharing data and talking to each other. He puts in a ton of work, man. He really loves this
So,
stuff, doing this
you
stuff.
do as well, man. We're
So,
both always on the grind, always doing it.
but if you guys don't mind, if you enjoy this content, we're not even asking for money or anything from you, but if you don't mind, please go give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, and that helps skirt around the algorithms, and it actually puts our content in front of thousands of more listeners every single day just by giving reviews, just by leaving comments. So if you guys don't mind, please do that. Also follow the show if you haven't followed the show yet, and don't just stop there with us. I mean, there's a lot of good creators and podcasters out there who are doing it right, and they're working hard at this. And a lot of our friends, we have them on our shows as well. So if you hear other people on our shows, also like Julia, like we mentioned a while ago, go support her show as well. I mean, we love helping other podcasters out as well. But yeah, definitely 5-star reviews and follows, man. That's the currency for us in this podcasting world. So yeah, and you can
Awesome.
find me at theawakenpodcast.com.
There we go. There
Yeah.
we go. All right, Brad, thank you so much. And we'll talk in a little bit.
All right, dude.
All right, everyone. That was Brad from the Awaken Podcast. I want to say thank you so much for coming out and dropping some information with us. The 33rd parallel, again, it's It's very peculiar. And I liked how he said, like, it's almost as if the world was folded. You know, there's a lot of similarities between North America and when you hit over to like the Middle East and Europe and whatnot. That's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard a lot of like biblical references of places in the U.S. in relation to, you know, we hit like Jerusalem and, well, I don't want to go too much into that, but there's a lot of similarities, things that we need to look into a little bit more and dive a little bit deeper. So if you guys are enjoying this content, make sure you guys, like Brad said, give a 5-star review. I really appreciate that. And if you're not enjoying all these advertisements, make sure you guys check out my Patreon, ad free. Okay. And it's like a coffee, just for a coffee for a month. You get this all ad free. You don't have to put up with any more of those ads. So until then, until the next time, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the Earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call